Okay, everybody, thank you very much. Great initial presentation this morning from Bruce and Valerie. Let's give them a round of applause. Great job. Outstanding. Set a very good foundation for us. And what I want to do in a short amount of time is work through some what I call corroborative research based upon what we heard this morning. Research done by DDI and Taleo and IBM and many other organizations point really to the predictive aspects that leadership assessment and leadership development does drive operating success. And so what I'm going to do is share with you some initial ideas based upon research that we do and have done at Executive Development Associates. In fact, I'm one of the co-researchers on this particular project that we just completed. We do it every 2 years, just like DDI's research. And what we have discovered is in concert with a lot of what we heard this morning. But it also points to some other things too. And so, again, 45 minutes is not a long time to talk. And I know that this morning was interactive. I'm pretty much going to go. Okay, so just kind of hold on to your hat because I tend to move and I want to get through some material. But certainly if you have a question, raise your hand and we'll take care of it. Okay, everybody? Okay. So anyway, as I just shared, we have done quite a bit of research. And what we look at are the factors that really do drive leadership success. And there are a multitude of factors, no question about it. What I'd like to share, though, initially are what I consider to be the typical selection and promotion challenges that you folks are faced with on a daily basis. What are the kinds of things that get in your way from executing success? And we don't have time to cover everything on the list. So what I've done is I've highlighted 3 or 4. Okay? And I just want to get a show of hands as we move down the list as to the ones that you're faced with and which ones are truly resonating in your experience. When you look at this whole area of selecting and promoting leaders and future leaders, it is certainly a challenge. But when you look at the ones that I've highlighted, high potentials are not identified and/or identified inaccurately. How many organizations in this room would be willing to raise their hand and say, hey, guess what? That's us. All right, I see some hands going up. How many organizations in this room are in fact faced with succession issues? I see a number of hands going up. In fact, the research that we just did indicated that about 50% of the organizations, and we researched over 100 organizations worldwide, and then we followed up with interviews. And what's interesting is 50% of organizations that we surveyed do not have a formal succession process in place. Do not have a formal succession process in place. However, when you look at the predictive analytics in terms of what drives operating success, it is absolutely amazing that if you do actually have a formal succession process, you increase the probability that you're going to impact operating metrics in a positive way. Everybody with me on this? Okay? And obviously, we could go for hours on this concept. Some of the other ones that resonate, selection promotion instruments don't measure leadership success factors. How many organizations in this room are struggling with instruments, assessments? You're not really sure which ones are truly capturing, right, the competencies that drive success. Which ones that are going to yield important information so that you can make better decisions. I love the medical analogy. Prescription before diagnosis is what? It's stupid, right? But it is malpractice. It is malpractice. And when you look at the work that we do as talent management experts, human resource experts, it is also prescription before diagnosis. If we're not calibrated on the assessments that we need to utilize to make better decisions, whether it be selection, whether it be promotion, right? Whether it be developmental planning, we need to do a better job isolating those assessments that are going to yield better information. I love the next concept. The best predictor of future performance is what? If you believe that, I will predict lower success in your organization. As we have a large something flying around, I believe that whatever that was just left the room, and I think that's a very good thing at this point. So anyway, when you look at this whole concept, I love this concept because really, if your notion, right, if your notion and your belief is that the work that you're doing is to predict leadership success from past success, you're not going to be successful. What you want to predict is not future success, but what you want to identify are the elements that drive future superior, sustained performance. There's a gentleman by the name of Marshall Goldsmith. How many people have heard him speak? And he's talked about this concept for years, right? He's talked about this for years, that what got you here won't get you there, all right? So an important concept as we analyze the importance of developing and assessing not only your current cadre of leaders, but the vast population of Gen X and Gen Ys who are your future leaders. And we already saw this morning that the Gen X population, from a number standpoint, doesn't match up. We are actually faced with certainly a demographic challenge, right? But when you look at the Gen Ys, there's simply not enough. And of course, they think they're ready, correct? I do a program at Florida Atlantic University. I teach in their executive MBA program. And I love working with the younger executive MBA students because everyone that I've met are so incredible. They're so passionate. They're driven people, right? They're driven people. Every single one of them, I say, hey, what do you want to do next? You know what they say? I want to be CEO. And I said, I know that. But you got some things to work on, okay? There's a lot of rounding experiences that are going to be very critical. Okay, so let's move on. Some other things that are very important when you look at this whole challenge around what I call benchmarking and diagnostic challenges. To what extent are you calibrating? To what extent are you measuring your current leaders? To what extent are you measuring your future leaders? Skill and talent gaps, bench strength issues, assessment instruments currently do not align well with target competencies. When you look at development challenges, what are you doing as an organization to create a compelling 70-20-10 combination that is enriching, that is engaging, where people, leaders, and future leaders have that sense that they can become the best that they can be. Everybody with me on this? Very, very important concept. So when I say 70-20-10, what does 70 constitute? Anybody? Learning through experiences, absolutely on the job. Structuring those experiences, structuring those developmental opportunities. 20% represents what? Learning from others, mentoring, coaching would reflect that concept. 10% would be what? the training programs, and so on and so forth. Would everybody agree that all three elements are important? They are absolutely important. There are some organizations that do better in this area than others. We have made tremendous strides. We have made tremendous strides as an industry in terms of executing at a higher level in terms of all the concepts that we've talked about so far this morning. We are doing a great job. Don't let anybody tell you that you're not doing a great job. We are doing such a good job. But question, is there room for improvement? Is there room for improvement in terms of executing this stuff at a higher level? Without question. When you get into this whole area that I call demarcation, I love that word. People get excited about that. They say, what do you mean by demarcation? Well, it is certainly the concept of separating the A players from the B players from the C players. And by the way, most organizations have actually advanced to the point where they're actually calibrating performance pretty good. But let me ask you this. When you get into the challenge of demarcating potential, right? Potential and readiness to assume higher level roles, are we doing as great a job? You tell me. Somebody help me with this. You tell me, are we doing a great job? The answer is we're not doing a great job. In fact, one of the findings that we looked at in our executive development surveys, the research that we just did was, we posed that question. The question that was posed was, when you make succession decisions in your organization, when you identify your high potentials and your emerging leaders, do you rely on assessments? Or do you rely on perception, guesses from senior level executive management, or combinations? The answer is combinations. But most organizations, when they do the 9-box, how many organizations in this room got the 9-box? Okay? Which is a great concept. It's a great concept for calibrating performance and potential. The problem is that if a 9-box procedure precedes discussion in these senior level executive reviews, okay, and not enough time has been spent on calibrating, is that person truly able to be projected for another position, and to what extent are they ready? Most organizations are falling short on that, okay? So again, some important things that I think are very, very critical. And when you put all of this together, you'll notice that I've got a stealth fighter model on the screen. And what you're going to see is that regardless of the challenge that you're faced with in this arena that we're talking about, your ability to successfully combat whatever challenge that you're faced with is in direct proportion to how strong you are in the 4 Ds that are literally at the bottom of the stealth, just like a stealth fighter airplane that does have how many engines? 4. Isn't that incredible? The stealth fighter has 4 engines. Let me ask you this. Do those 4 engines need to work well together? What do you think? Absolutely. They need to be extremely well oiled. They need to be working in concert. They need to be optimized. All right? Need to be optimized. What's interesting is, when you look at the 4 Ds, to what extent are you selecting and promoting those leaders who have the highest probability of being successful? To what extent are you diagnosing? Are you benchmarking? Are you calibrating that they do have the skills and the capabilities to excel at a high level now and into the future? To what extent are you creating an enriching environment where leaders and future leaders can become the best that they can be? And to what extent are you demarcating talent? If you excel in those 4 areas, you do successfully combat whatever challenge that you're faced with. The beautiful aspect of this is that you also create predictably a magical environment. People say, what are you talking about? Everybody can tell I get excited about this stuff, right? I love what we're talking about. You live it, I live it. The magical environment that we create are 3 words that if you excel in the 4 areas, the 4 engines, you create leadership capability, you create leadership commitment, and you create leadership alignment. There are 2 words that I like to use that really substitute for the word capability. It is the words can do. Do you want leaders and future leaders showing up to work every day saying, I can execute at a high level? Show of hands. We want that. In fact, we want every human being who works in your organization to show up saying, I can execute at a high level. I have the skills, I have the capability to excel consistently at a high level. I think we'd all agree that certainly capability is a necessary, but it is not a sufficient condition for driving incredible operating success in our organizations. That's why the word commitment is so magical. So if capability is can do, commitment must be what? It is the will do. And people say, well, what do you mean by this? Well, what I mean by this is leaders and future leaders who are passionate, who are driven, who are motivated to excel at a high level now and into the future. All right? Everybody with me on this? Capability can do, commitments will do. The third factor is alignment. I love alignment. Alignment is when a leader is connected with the strategic mission of the organization. It's an emotional connection. How many people in this room have experienced that emotional connection with the work that you do? Show of hands. Does it feel good? It feels incredible. Let me tell you what. This factor is so important because what I see in great leaders, as I go around and I coach many executives, I am privileged to work with many executives around all of this stuff. And what I see in great leaders and what you need to cultivate in your emerging leaders, the younger people who are so talented, aren't they? There's so much talent out there. How do you identify your future leaders? They need to capture the essence of the CCA. Here's what I see. Great leaders, under the umbrella of their own capability, create an environment where their people become more capable, more committed, more aligned. Everybody with me on this? In fact, let's have some fun with this. I'd like to repeat can do, will do, must do together in unison, just to have some fun. Some people looking at me saying, this guy's a strange guy. Well, you already know me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, let's do this on 3. What we're going to do is we're going to repeat in unison, can do, will do, must do. Let's see what we got. I know it's early, but we should be awake by now, all right? Okay, on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Can do, will do, must do.
Whew. I am moved by that. I don't even need to say anything else at this point. Bruce, that was excellent.
That was good.
That was better than Seattle. So anyway, love to have some fun with this. So everybody's, what's interesting is we could spend hours on this. If you look on the right-hand side, I've got some language there that's kind of interesting. I call these three elements leading indicators, not unlike our economy. There is an analogy. When you look at our economy, it's a little sad, right? But when you look at it, you can predict economic conditions. The stock market is a leading indicator that will predict our economy. Stock market. The consumer price index is a leading indicator. It predicts our economy. Unemployment is not a leading indicator. It is what? It is a lagging indicator. Turnover in your organization is leading or lagging? It is lagging. It is too late. That's why engagement surveys are so important. Because what you want to do is you want to assess and you want to calibrate engagement before it has negative impact in your organization. Everybody with me on this? Let me ask you this. Performance reviews, leading or lagging? So, ultimately, people say, well, how do you propel an organization to success? How do you develop your current leaders? And how do you develop your future leaders? You better make sure that you're playing in the league of measuring capability, commitment, and alignment. And once you calibrate that information, you better do something with it. Yet in the previous research study, what did we find out? Most organizations are not executing IDPs. All right? Most organizations are really not doing a great job in terms of assessment. Now, some people say, what are you talking about? We use 360s. How many people in this room use 360s? 360s. 360s are an absolutely great way to calibrate performance. It is not a great way to calibrate potential. It is not. Unless there is a high relationship, going back to what Bruce shared earlier this morning, unless there's a relationship from a condition standpoint between the competencies required for success in this position, right, and the competencies required for success in that position, if there's a match, then you can make the leap. There are better measures to measure potential. For example, how many organizations in this room use the Hogan assessments? The Hogan suite of assessments measure intra and interpersonal characteristics which endure. So once you calibrate that information and you interpret it correctly, you get some great information around potential. How many organizations in this room are familiar with the CPI 260, CPI, California Psych Inventory? That is a very good potential measure. I've got a great way to measure potential and make decisions on it. Simulation assessments. How many organizations in this room are using assessment centers or simulation kinds of things, right? That information yields very, very good decisions about, hey, will that person execute, and can they execute those skills? We heard some very compelling research this morning. Here's some research that is also compelling. There's a group in Atlanta called the Hackett Group. The Hackett Group does incredible research on all the stuff that we've been talking about. 2 years ago, they did this study where they took the Fortune 500 organizations and they broke them into two groups, top quartile and everybody else. All right? In terms of their ability to execute the 4 Ds. Okay? Everybody got this in their mind. Okay? Top quartile, great execution. The other 75%, lousy execution. And then what they did was they measured the operating results. And what you see on the screen are the operating results. Do we need to say any more? Ladies and gentlemen, you tell me. Is the work that we do, does it have an impact on operating results? Does it? Without question. The work that we do has value, significant value. And so anyway, I worked through these slides fairly quickly. Actually, we don't even need to hit them because we really pretty much just covered them. Ultimately, quality of hire, promotion, and succession metrics are leading indicators that drive your organization's operating results. Some people say, well, what do you mean by succession metrics? How many organizations in this room would be willing to raise their hand to this question? How many organizations in this room have isolated for their key positions at least 2 to 3 candidates who are ready now to assume those positions and identified 3 to 5 ready later candidates? How many organizations in this room have actually advanced their succession processes to that point? Show of hands. Okay, I don't see many hands going up. Interesting. If you have arrived at that point where you're actually that structured in your succession processes, higher probability you're going to drive operating success. So that's certainly an important factor. Here's another succession metric. To what extent are your succession decisions correct? To what extent are you proud of those decisions that you're making regarding who are your high potentials and who are your likely successors? If your decisions are more successful, guess what? You drive higher operating success. What an amazing concept. Here's another one. What about the retention rate of those individuals in your successor pool? If you have a higher retention rate, probability is higher operating success, and on and on and on. So I think we got the concepts. Everybody got the concept on this? Okay, we're good. Just going to move through some slides here. We're going to cover this. What do I got? I got about, 15 more minutes? So anyway, as I said, I do quite a bit of work with emerging leaders, high-post, senior executives around coaching. And what we see on the screen, to go back to the earlier presentation, is an example of a competency model. It's one that executive development associates we work with. On the outer core, you will notice a number of competencies that we've identified that drive success, whether you are a current leader or emerging leader. You will notice critical thinking. There was a gentleman earlier this morning who, when Bruce asked, what are the key skills, indicated critical thinking. I'm not sure who that was, but in our research, which actually does corroborate a lot of the DDI research, we discovered critical thinking as a very important predictor of success. So the ability to recognize assumptions, the ability to evaluate arguments, the ability to draw good conclusions are very, very important skills when you look at the pace and the complexity of business, right, that we're all under. The pace is incredible. So here's what we've discovered. If you're a great critical thinker, your ability to make great decisions goes up. You'll notice decision making on the screen. Is that correct? If you are a great critical thinker, your ability to solve problems goes up. If you're a great critical thinker, your ability to be a strategic thinker goes up. Interesting, isn't it? So what you see on the outer core are skills. These are leadership competencies. How many organizations in this room have emotional intelligence or emotional leadership in their competency models? I don't see many hands going up. We got to have this. We got to have this. When you're looking for your future leaders, you need to make sure that they are leaders who have emotional intelligence, sensitivity to other human beings, a self-awareness, so critical, talent leadership, team leadership, change, and so on and so forth. Here's what I've discovered, and it is the core of the coaching that I do, and I hope what I share, you can begin to apply if you're not currently applying it. There is a strong relationship between an executive's inner core strength and their outer core execution. Let me repeat that. There is a strong relationship between a leader's inner core strength and their outer core execution. If a leader has a strong inner core, self-concept, character, value system, references, a positive belief system. If a leader has a strong inner core, it is much easier for them to execute what is required for success. This is why when I do 360 reviews with organizations, which I do many of them, I'm sure many of you in this room do 360 reviews with your executives, right? Show of hands. What a great concept. But guess what? I always tell my client, hey, it's great to debrief a 360, but it is certainly much better if I can get calibrated information on their inner core, okay? Very, very important. I want to get a sense of their values. I want to get a sense of their self-image. Character. Character is a huge predictor of success. Here's one character element that is very important that you need to look for in your future leaders. I love this one. It's called courage. Courage. Courage is different than fearlessness. There's a big difference between the two. Courage in a leader is an act of execution. It is an act of conviction. It is an act of conviction. Fearlessness, by contrast, is a feeling and emotion. It is different. I have met countless executives, and I know you have too, who profess to be courageous. Everybody with me on this? Who profess to have the guts to make a tough call, have the guts to make a tough decision. But when it comes down to actually executing that decision, they fall short. How many people in this room have seen that before? That is actually the majority, by the way. It is the minority that you need to seek out of executives who are willing to raise their hand, who are willing to say they're vulnerable, right? Who are willing to say, I don't know everything, who are willing to say, I need help, and they seek that help, and when it comes down to making that tough call, what do? They follow through and make that tough call. One of the gentlemen I do coach, and I don't think he would mind me sharing this, is the current CEO of FedEx Freight, Bill Logue. I've worked with Bill for over 2 years. Let me tell you what, this gentleman is an incredible guy. And what he shared with me a couple of years ago just kind of reinforced this notion that courage is an important developmental aspect in a leader. It was not until Bill admitted a few years ago, when he was in a lower level role, that he did not know everything. All right? That he was vulnerable, that he needed input and guidance from other human beings was the point at which it became a very enriching thing for him. And there is also a difference between a consistent act of conviction and heroism. Because we can all be heroes. You don't want leaders. You don't want emerging leaders to be spontaneous. All right? We can all be spontaneous. What you want is consistency. And you can measure character. You can. You got to measure values. Okay? There's a relationship between the two. By the way, there are 6 elements of character. I just shared one. Let me give you a few others. Here's another one. Diligence. What do I mean by diligence? Can anybody help me with this? What is meant by diligence? Persistence. Mary, good point. Anybody else? You got to have this. It's a non-negotiable. By the way, these are definitions of capability, commitment, and alignment. Okay? These are really definitions. You've got to have people who are your future leaders who are diligent, who are willing to work hard. There's no shortcut. That's why when I work with these MBA students, I tell them directly, there's no shortcut. You need to go through experiences and references that are going to yield positive situations, but also, here's a key developmental work, failure. One of the greatest developmental aspects in developing any human being, kids, ourselves, is failure. Any baseball fans out here? Baseball. I'm a big baseball fan. Any major league, and I've talked to these major league players. I love this whole game. When you go to a major league player and you say, hey, what's your batting average? And they say, I'm a 300 hitter. So people who don't know baseball say what? You stink. You're horrible. But anybody who knows baseball, 300 batting average is what? It's big time. Especially the major leagues. So you know what that says? That says, hey, I'm successful 3, but I fail 7. So if you ask that major leaguer, hey, do you learn more when you go through those 7 at-bats where you look like a fool, right? 3 or 4 times because you're facing a pitcher that, if it goes this way and whatever. Do they learn from that experience? Absolutely. They wouldn't be in the major leagues. Because what we see in major leagues are the ability to make those adjustments. And that's what you need to do. When you look at your current leaders, do they have the ability to make the adjustments? Can your future leaders make the adjustments? So anyway, I'm going to end on a story. When I was 16 years old, my dad came up to me. I grew up outside of the Boston area in Waltham. Anybody familiar with Waltham outside of Boston? That's where I grew up. So anyway, my dad came up to me and he said, hey, do you want to learn how to drive a stick shift automobile? How many people remember the time when you learned how to drive a stick shift automobile? Huh? Sad. So anyway, I want everybody to understand something here. My dad's no longer with us. But my dad was a great guy. And he was from Brooklyn, New York. My name is Italian. He was a tough Italian guy from Brooklyn, New York. Okay? He was a great guy. And so when my dad came up to me at 16, he said, guess what? Do you want to learn? What did I say? Whew. Let's go. And you know the car that I had in the driveway? Volkswagen Beetle. Right? Red. No horn. No floorboard. It didn't matter. He said, get in the car. I said, okay. So I said, where are we going? He says, we're going to the high school parking lot. I said, why are we going to the high school parking lot? You know what he said? Because it's big. I said, that's negative. He said, get in the car. So there we go. We go to the high school parking lot. And he says, sit down. So I sat down. See, some of you are going to have a complex right now, right? You're kind of going back through these experiences right now. Some of you are not going to be able to leave here today, right? So what happened? I sit down, and I don't know what happened. I froze. I literally froze. I grabbed the wheel, and then all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see a very impatient dad. He's impatient. So what does he do? Hits me on the shoulder, and I couldn't look. I was afraid. And then all of a sudden, he hits me again. And then I looked at him. It was one of the ugliest. It was one of the ugliest looks I've ever seen in a human being. My dad looked at me with incredible conviction and passion. He said, do something. Do something now. And I looked at him and I said, I don't know what to do. He said, put your foot on the pedal and depress the clutch. Start there. I looked down, I said, there's 3 pedals. I got 2 feet. There's no way any human being can drive an automobile with 3 pedals and that human being have 2 feet. I said, there's no way. So something magical happened that day. We've all been through this experience before. Actually, what you see on the screen, we go through every day. This is how we propel ourselves. This is how we propel leaders. This is how we propel our kids. Right? Because what we want to do is create a cycle where people have positive thoughts, right? Positive emotions, so they can execute the required behaviors, so they can execute the skills to drive success, and lo and behold, that whole cycle impacts self-image and self-concept. Ultimately, what you want to do is convert I can'ts. I'm not too sure about that. I'm fearful of doing that. Ultimately, what you want to do is convert I can'ts into what? I can, I will, and then ultimately from a team standpoint, we can, we will, we must. So through trial and error that day, I learned a lot. It was one of the more difficult experiences I've ever been through, but as a result of the trial and error and all the references that go with it, ultimately, I was able to convert it into a healthy belief mechanism that I can execute. Folks, I tell you, I'd love to spend all day with you. I truly appreciate the opportunity to be here today. One of the things that I want to leave with is a poem. And you don't need to write this down. I certainly never recite this to the executives I'm privileged to work with. Never. But I certainly try to instill the themes as I work with executives. And I hope that as you think about this poem, that you'll think about the themes that you can build into your own personal life, the work that you do as leaders in organizations, and in your personal life. And the poem goes like this. Be careful of your beliefs, for your beliefs become your thoughts. Be careful of your thoughts, for your thoughts become your feelings. Be careful of your feelings, for your feelings become your actions. Be careful of your actions, For your actions become your habits. Be careful of your habits, for your habits do become your character. And be careful of your character, for your character becomes your destiny. And I want you to think about that. And I appreciate, again, the chance to spend 45 minutes with you. What we're going to do now, folks, is we're going to take about a 15-minute break. We're going to come back with a great case study. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.